welcome to the presentation here today. My name is Yvonna Lee, and I'm presenting today on behalf of the quantum computing team at Roche Period. Here's the structure of how Roche Pharma is organized. For some of you who are not so familiar with our company, we have 3 individual R&D departments, and PRED standing for Pharma, Research, and Early Development is one of them. We're mainly based in Basel. We have GRED, which is in the Bay Area, and Chugai in Tokyo. And we share one single late-stage and commercial organization. And here is the overview of the PRED quantum computing team. So in the center, you can see our 2 co-leads, Martin and Marielle. On the left, we have our core team members, and we all come from or most of us come from the data and analytics part of PRED. On the right-hand side, you can see the different scientific experts who work in across different PRED functions. One of the key objectives of the quantum computing team is to find out when and how quantum computing can make an impact on the R&D pipeline. And we realized pretty early on that we cannot answer this question by ourselves. We don't have the deep expertise in quantum mechanics or quantum computing. So it was really important from the beginning to build the right partnerships. So here is a list of some of the close partners that we work with from academia, also startups and industry consortia. We also formulated our efforts around 3 areas of application. You can see here chemistry simulation, which was talked about earlier in the presentation, and optimization, machine learning. These are areas of application that's also probably talked about within other industries, but we saw these as a good crossover between business impact and technical feasibility for us. And it was important for us to be able to come up with concrete use cases within these areas of application in order to benchmark the progress that's being made in the field. When we see papers being published every day, new hardware platforms being announced. So it was really important for us to gauge where the improvement is coming from and how big of an impact we can expect. So within each area of application, for example, chemistry simulation, we looked into a specific use case, binding infinity, which is also talked about earlier, which has a strong impact on our early R&D process in the lead optimization and lead identification process. Optimization and machine learning, they will have an impact across the entire R&D pipeline and also in the later stages as well. And we looked into protein folding, which is a very interesting problem for us, an unsolved biological problem. And for machine learning, we want to look into image classification, where we have really a wealth of classical benchmarks, and we wanted to see if it's possible for quantum computing to make a difference there. And I'll be walking through each of these use cases briefly. What we want to highlight here is that for us, it was really important to collaborate with our partners to work on fundamental research, which was one of the messages from the previous presentation as well, that the problems that we're looking into is far from being solved. And I think we still need to work together with academia to develop better algorithms, and of course also be on the lookout for better hardware, and really to push the envelope together. And we're really proud to be co-publishing these papers with our partners in each of these use cases. So the first one is, like I mentioned before, in calculating the binding infinity. This is important because once we have identified the target that we want to modulate the behavior, we have a huge library of molecules that can potentially bind to the target, and it's important for us to be able to identify the target or a ligand, ligand which has the highest specificity. And we can do this in an in vitro fashion, where we do the wet lab experiments to be able to rank the binding infinity, or if we're able to calculate these energies accurately in silico, that would save us a lot of effort. So we wanted to also investigate how practically this pans out on real hardware that's available today. So we did an experiment on the base1 enzyme, where we know that this is to be part of a key pathway for important disease. And we have very thoroughly validated experimental data, both in-house and publicly available. So very quickly, here's the result that we got from 2 different types of hardware, from the superconducting machine from IBM and also the ion trap machine Honeywell. For both of these graphs, you can see on the x-axis is our ground truth, which is the energy that we got from our wet lab experiment. And on the y-axis is what our quantum algorithm gave us. And you can see to the left, for example, we got an R squared of 0.77. For data science, R squared 0.77 gives us some signal and it sounds promising. But when we show this result to our chemists, the feedback was a little more sobering. For example, they told us looking at molecules 67 and 69, which from our experimental results show that one is a strong binder and one is a weak binder. The quantum algorithm was not able to differentiate between them at all. So yeah, at the end of the day, our conclusion was with this specific approach, which is density matrix embedding theory in combination with VQE on the current state-of-art hardware, we're not able to get results that's ready to be incorporated into our daily business process. But we're continually on the lookout for maybe better methods and bigger machines to see if we can get improvement in this area. Now, the next use case in protein folding, it's also very important for pharma, because we know that biology is modulated by proteins, and our immune system in particular is modulated by antibodies. And there are quite a lot of effort into sequencing these antibodies. So we know the amino sequence of these. But in order to be able to predict their behavior under different environment and how they respond to different antigens, we still need to be able to predict the 3D structure of these antibodies. And to predict the 3D structure of antibodies, knowing their amino sequence is also a computationally formidable task right now. It's also not a solved problem. And we want to see if quantum computing can make a difference there. And we chose this specific loop called the H3 antibody loop, which is known to be the binding site, and it's also known to be classically hard to simulate and also to validate experimentally because it's very sensitive to environmental changes. And here, instead of doing the experiment on hardware, we went for a more theoretical analysis where we looked into the resource requirement for the prediction of this loop. And as we can see on screen here, that even though we were able to find for the quantum Monte Carlo method an algorithm which in theory give us order of magnitude faster in terms of the number of steps that it takes, but given the current quantum hardware where the algorithm's bottlenecks comes from the Toffoli gate, which is orders of magnitude slower than the, for example, the AND gate on a typical CPU, we still expect the total simulation time to be way bigger on the quantum computer compared to the classical solution. So that was also, let's say, a sobering finding from our theoretical analysis. So unless we see a significant increase in the clock rate of these hardware machines, it's hard for us to see a quantum advantage here with quantum Monte Carlo method. Okay, last but not least is the machine learning use case. As we probably all know, neural networks has been sweeping the floor in many different areas of application, pushing the boundary on different data modalities, not just images, but also text and so on. And we wanted to see if there is a chance that quantum circuits can make a difference. The high-level motivation being that artificial neural network is a series of matrix multiplication underneath the hood, right? And from the beginning of quantum computing, it has been, well studied that quantum circuits have an inherent advantage in doing linear algebra and exploring this higher dimensional Hilbert space. And it was important then for us to see, especially using our NISC machines, if there were some parts of this linear algebra that we can speed up. For example, matrix to vector multiplication or this inner product estimation. And we looked into medical imaging, which is a thriving field of research, and that's something that we actively use a lot in our day-to-day pipeline. And deep learning has pushed the boundary there, but we all know that the disadvantage there is that the successful architectures are very compute intensive, right? Requiring a big number of parameters and large amount of training data. So we want to ask the question, can quantum computing maybe offer an advantage in terms of the efficiency or the accuracy? And we have looked into the MedMNIST data set, which is an open source collection of classification data set, which has several different state-of-the-art classical benchmark results available. All right, and the approach that we took with the team at QCware actually is looking into the so-called orthogonal neural network and the transformer architecture. So the orthogonal neural network classically has already been proven to help with training very deep algorithms when you add this additional restraint that your weight matrices are orthogonal, which helps to maximize the information that you capture with these weight matrices. And we know that the unitary that's performed on the quantum circuit is also orthogonal out of the box. So the team kind of put the two ideas together and came up with a way that we can train actually the quantum orthogonal neural network quadratically faster. And we also found that by reparametrizing the problem, we can also speed up the training process classically as well, which is a nice, let's say, add-on to our paper. And also with the transformer networks, you might have heard this has been taking over, let's say, the deep learning community in text processing and also in visual tasks, where at the center of, or the core of the idea is that we use the attention mechanism to weigh, let's say, component of your input data in its global context. And this is the idea that we also took quantum spin to, and we were able to train this quantum attention mechanism exponentially faster with respect to the input size of the data. So promising results, and here is just the overall high-level results, what it looks like in practice. For the orthogonal neural network, we benchmarked it on 2 different data sets, and all in all, we were able to get, let's say, similar levels of accuracy between our quantum and classical solution. But we do, however, to see a drop in the level of accuracy that the algorithm is able to reach once we go for a bigger input space on the hardware. So if we go from 4-dimensional input space to 8-dimensional, then we do see that the hardware is struggling, right? And you see a drop in the performance. For the transformer architecture, we did a little more extensive benchmarking across the 12 different data sets, and I would say on average we reached performance on par with our classical benchmarks. And what we like to highlight is that while we get similar level of accuracy, with the approach that we propose, we do require significantly less number of parameters to be trained. So it is a more efficient solution in that sense. All right, so yeah, in conclusion, we are working towards, let's say, a quantum neural network, but we know that it's only, let's say, small scale demonstration that we're able to do on the hardware and through simulation. And we would say that continued research is needed in this direction. And this can be said across the different use cases, right? We still believe that investment into fundamental research and collaboration with academia and other partners is the way to go. And the benchmarks has been very useful for us in order to help gauge the progress that's being made in this field and help us focus our efforts. And yeah, we're constantly on the lookout, like I said, to be able to get ready once the hardware is commercially viable to be able to take hold of this advantage. So thank you very much for your attention, and yeah, look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Really great talk. A lot of exciting use cases. Are there any questions about her work? Oh, there's one over there. Should I give him the mic or can? Okay.
Hi, thank you for a great talk. I had a question. When you're looking at the R value plots before, you said it might be a combination of the VQE approach plus the hardware. Do you have a sense of how much of that error is coming from kind of, I guess, like if the hardware was noiseless, what would you expect in this case?
Yeah, so this result I think is coming from the noise of the hardware in combination with the method, which is an approximation. Also, the fact that we, I think, only simulated about 4 electrons in that binding site. So it's the result of all those limiting factors. So yeah, we weren't able to simulate much beyond the four electrons for this particular hardware.
I actually had a question on this slide too. It's a very interesting study here, but I was wondering, how did you decide what geometry to take? Because these are all single point calculations, right? So for example, for molecules 67 and 69, you said the binding like affinities are very different, but the ones you calculate are very similar. Could this be just you unluckily chose different type of geometries, or how did you decide that? I think it's
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I have to say that I'm not a chemist,
I see,
so
okay.
I think this question is better answered. But what I do understand is that there's quite a lot of assumptions or simplification we did have to make.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that all contributed. I think, for example, you couldn't really maybe test this in the solution. For example, you had to make yeah.
I see. So it could be just a simplification from basically going from free energies to electronic energies instead of errors being introduced by the quantum computer, right? So
yeah, we weren't able to really simulate it in a realistic setting, that's for
okay.
sure. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Nevertheless, a very interesting approach. Are there any other questions? Yeah, all right, let me walk down.
Thank you. So for your alpha folding, for your protein folding, how is yours compared to AlphaFold that a lot of the folded structure are predicted by AlphaFold?
So we didn't. So we just did a theoretical analysis on the resource requirement. So we didn't actually run the experiment, so to speak. So I think it's hard to make a direct comparison here. But what I would like to highlight is that compared to AlphaFold, that we are, let's say, predicting the 3D structures from the basic, let's say, yeah, I forgot to mention. So we're using a charm family of energy field equations, and so we're solving it from first principles instead of using a more heuristic approach like deep learning. So that's kind of the let's say the main difference between these two approaches. Yeah. But we were mostly interested in understanding how the algorithm would scale, because we already know the size of the hardware is too limited for us to run, a good molecule. So.
Right. Are there any more questions? All right, one more. Working off my lunch here.
Thank you for a great talk. I had a related question actually about these plots here, and I just wondered whether you had a sense of how much theoretical additional benefit you could get from really precise quantum chemistry in terms of ranking molecules here, and whether, I know we already heard about the potential confirmation issue. I'm wondering whether, for example, even just understanding the protein structure exactly, or whether sort of dynamical effects, whether those sort of introduce bigger issues than maybe you can kind of squash down with better chemistry. And it probably depends completely on which target you're looking at and all sorts of things. But is there a sort of sense on kind of how much there is to squeeze out of better calculations like this? Thank you.
Let's see if I understood the question. Sorry, I'm still struggling with jet lag here. So I think for us overall, it was, even though despite the, let's say, slightly disappointing results, it was still good for us to, let's say, understand where the theoretical limit is for each of these, let's say, approximate method, right? This density matrix embedding theory, for example, we know that there are certain limitations with that, and so we're also interested to look into maybe other approximation methods. And it was important to also understand in combination with that and the current hardware where that limit exactly was. So I think overall that exercise was informative in that sense. I hope that helps to answer your question, yeah.